The 2025 NFL trade deadline is coming up tomorrow on Tuesday. Is a big trade coming for the San Francisco 49ers? Let's talk about it here. You're watching the 49ers Report by Chat Sports. My name is Chase Senior. Happy Monday to everybody. Obviously, it's a victory Monday for the Niners, and we recap that win yesterday against the New York Giants. If you're pumped up about it being a victory Monday and that Niners win, it's a tradition here on this show. Hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. But obviously, with the deadline coming up tomorrow, a lot of trade speculation here with San Francisco and other teams across the NFL, and that is an important topic to discuss. Jay Glazer, Fox Sports NFL insider, saying yesterday on the Fox pregame show that the Niners, among the teams being aggressive going into the deadline. Here is the quote from Glazer, who's obviously tapped in to a lot of teams across the NFL and has very good sources. The teams I would say are most aggressive right now going into this trade deadline: Seahawks, Bears, 49ers, Cowboys, and Eagles. And you think about the teams on your screen right here that Glazer mentioned. Seahawks had one of the most impressive wins of the season last night, Sunday Night Football, dump trucking Washington. Chicago Bears, in a wild game, came back in the final seconds to take down the Cincinnati Bengals. Niners beat the Giants. Cowboys play the Arizona Cardinals tonight. That's a big game in the NFC for both of those teams as they cling to playoff hopes. And then the Philadelphia Eagles, 6-2, number one seed in the NFC. They're looking to get better, as are all of these other teams. All of these teams have made moves or are going to make moves. And look at what the Eagles did here this morning. They took a pass rusher off the market, a player who San Francisco may have been interested in. A 26-year-old edge in Jalen Phillips, a former first-round pick who, when healthy, has played really well, and the Eagles get him for a 2026 third-round pick. The Eagles got better. I expect some of those other teams that I mentioned to get better. They are threats in the NFC, but so too are the San Francisco 49ers. And you think about what happened yesterday. The MetLife turf, it got another victim. Looks as though Mykel Williams, first-round pick for the Niners back in April's draft, going to be lost for the season with a torn ACL. A brutal injury for him, a brutal injury for this Niners ball club as they continue to be beaten up and battered all across the roster, especially at defensive end and pass rusher. All of these defensive ends either out for the year or are currently hurt. Nick Bosa, gone for the season. Clean ACL tear. That happened in week 4. Yetur Gross-Matos, late last week in practice, re-aggravated that hamstring injury. He's on injured reserve. He's barely played for the Niners the last 2 years. Bryce Huff, hamstring injury. Might be able to play against the Rams this upcoming week, but who knows? And now Mykel Williams might be out for the season. That'll be confirmed with an MRI, but when a team says we fear it's an ACL, I'd say 90-95% of the time, it's an ACL tear, and that would mean that the rookie first-round pick out of Georgia, who's only 21 years old, who had been really coming on, not going to see him until next year. Now, the Niners did make a couple of moves last week to address defensive end, because at one point last week, once Trevis Gibson got poached off the practice squad and signed to the Panthers' active roster, the Niners had 2 healthy defensive ends on the roster. Just because they didn't have enough bodies for a game against the Giants, they needed to make some moves. So they traded for Keon White in a move with New England. I thought he showed a little bit yesterday and showed some flashes. He is a powerful defensive end who can play defensive end and defensive tackle, win with the bull rush, and he looked solid wearing the number 56 yesterday. Cleveland Ferrell was signed to the practice squad, elevated to the active game day roster. He had that huge hit and the sack of Jackson Dart. Those are 2 good pieces, but I still think the Niners need to make another move. Losing Mykel Williams for the 49ers really hurts. First of all, this is your first-round pick who needs reps to develop. I know that his play this year has been up and down, but sometimes his impact didn't show up in the box score. It showed up on film when he would absorb double teams, allowing his teammates to make a play on the quarterback or make a play on the ball carrier. At defensive end, he did such a great job of setting the edge, making plays against the run. And he was starting to come on and develop a little bit as a pass rusher. Arguably had his best game as a rookie yesterday against the Giants. 3 pressures against New York. The play that he got hurt on was a play where he got to Jackson Dart and kind of blew that play up. And he's an excellent run defender. This year, too, 14 hurries, that ranks 36th among all of the defensive ends in football, and 16 pressures, that ranked 55th. So while he might not have gaudy sack numbers, he was a highly impactful player with what the Niners like to do on defense and what he did specifically within the scheme. So my take here, defensive end and pass rusher is the position to pinpoint for San Francisco. And now that you're without Nick Bosa, you're without Yetur Gross-Matos, you're without, most likely, Mykel Williams, John Lynch has no other choice. He needs to make a move at the pass rusher spot because the Niners lack bodies, but as I alluded to briefly earlier, the NFC is wide open, and San Francisco has an opportunity here to be a factor in the NFC. That win yesterday was huge. There is a massive difference between being 6-3 and 5-4. You're either one game above 500 or you're 3 games above 500. That is a 2-game swing there for San Francisco. And I know that right now they're listed as a wild card team when you take a gander at the NFC playoff picture, but they're also 3-0 inside the NFC West with a game coming up this week against the Rams. They play the Seahawks the final week of the year. They play the Cardinals here soon. And so the NFC is up for grabs. There is not a clear-cut best team that is superior to the other squads. Philadelphia Eagles had a bye week yesterday, but because of losses by Green Bay and Detroit, they move up to the number 1 seed. The Buccaneers, who the Niners hung with despite playing a bad game, are the 2 seed at 6-2. The Niners already beat Seattle on the road, and Seattle right now in that 3 spot at 6-2. If the Niners win the division, they can realistically get the number 2 or the number 3 seed. You have the Green Bay Packers there in the 4th spot at 5-2-1. Then you have the Rams in the 5th seed, Niners in that 6th spot, and then rounding things out, the Detroit Lions, that 7 seed at 5-3. So if I'm John Lynch, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm saying, look, we're going to get Brandon Ayuk back. We're going to get Ricky Pearsall back. We've had 2 good rushing performances in the last 3 games. Our defense is never going to be stellar because there's a ceiling on how good they can be, which is the reality when you lose Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, and now most likely Mykel Williams. But if they can play solid, if they can bend but not break, and this offense gets a little bit better with Kyle Shanahan running the offense, Robert Saleh running the defense, this team can accomplish something pretty special this year. You get into the dance, anything can happen. You host a playoff game, and anything can happen. And this division and this conference is up for grabs, even though the Niners are banged up and they're a young ball club. Before we continue to push forward on today's show, real quick, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If the 49ers make a move, you know we're going to talk about it. They made that trade for Keon White. We did a breaking news video on it. That is the standard that we hold ourselves to. We're approaching 179,000 subscribers. Thanks to everybody who joined in and watched the watch party yesterday. The coverage does not stop. Now, coming up next here on the 49ers Report, edge rusher trade targets, who the Niners can trade for. Players who I like, players who I think can make a lot of sense for the Niners to go after prior to tomorrow's deadline. But first, this episode of the 49ers Report brought to you by Prize Picks. The hard-hitting football action even better with Prize Picks. Look, the weather might be changing, but the feeling of being right, it never changes and it never gets old. So keep the season rolling on Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. This is the #1 fantasy sports app in North America. You can get your picks in less than 60 seconds. Turn your takes into cash with Prize Picks. It's also the only app that offers stacks. You can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more on Christian McCaffrey's receiving yards, rush yards, and touchdowns, for instance. Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup only on Prize Picks. We have a 4-pick power play for Monday Night Football. Cowboys at home going up against Arizona. CD Lamb. This is the stacks here. Let's go more than 83.5 receiving yards, more than a half rushing or receiving touchdown. Jacoby Brissett going to get the start in Jerry World, where Kyler Murray is undefeated going back to his high school days. More than 250.5 passing yards, and then Marvin Harrison more than 59.5 receiving yards. So here's the deal. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, let's move forward here on the show. Here are my favorite edge rusher trade targets for San Francisco. The most obvious one, Trey Hendrickson. Did not play yesterday in that wild Cincinnati loss against the Chicago Bears, in which both those teams were riding the seesaw. He's dealing with the hip injury right now. It's not believed to be long-term, and I would imagine that Cincinnati held him out in that game because they're trying to see what trade offers they could get for him, a player who is not under contract beyond this year, for a team that lost again and might be losing their playoff hopes, seeing those slip away. According to reports, the Bengals have been steadfast in saying, we're not going to trade him. That changed yesterday, and according to those aforementioned reports, the Bengals are willing to listen to offers for Hendrickson. This would be my favorite available player for the Niners to go after because he's elite, 17.5 sacks in 2023, 17.5 sacks in 2024. Character-wise, he would fit the Niners locker room. He's a team captain. He plays the game with an unbelievable motor and great energy. He loves the game of football, and I think he would be a phenomenal scheme fit for Robert Saleh and Chris Kocurek. Now, his number's pretty damn good this year. 4 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, 23 pressures, and a 90 pass rush grade. Obviously, those sack numbers not as high as they've been the last 2 years because he's been a little bit banged up. But you bring him in and he gets healthy, he can really make the rest of the defense a lot better. My other favorite trade target is Kayvon Thibodeau. Now that the Giants are 2-7, will they change their minds on Kayvon and will they trade him? Will they sell going into the deadline? This Giants defensive line and Giants defense as a whole is the worst rushing defense in the NFL. As our Giants now host Marshall Green said, it's the worst rushing defense he's ever seen. They gave up nearly 300 rushing yards 2 weeks ago against the Eagles. And then yesterday, the Niners ran over them and through them and all over them. Thibodeau, I do think, is a solid run defender. Is he elite? No, but nor is Trey Hendrickson. While you would make a move for Thibodeau, he's under contract next year. Hendrickson is not. Probably won't cost as much to trade for him. And he's younger than Trey Hendrickson. Does have a little bit of an injury history. That's a little bit of a concern, but he does have 2.5 sacks this year, 9 quarterback hits, 25 pressures, and a pass rush grade of 61.6. I think he would be a good scheme fit for the Niners as well. A player who Robert Saleh is very familiar with is Jermaine Johnson of the Jets, a former first-round pick out of Florida State. He did suffer an Achilles tear last year, and he's starting to round into form. His numbers to start the year a little bit down for New York, but I do think there's a good player in there because we've seen it, and Robert Saleh knows him very well, and Johnson has played very well under Saleh's watchful eye and tutelage. A sack this year, 2 quarterback hits, 14 pressures, and a pass rush grade of 59.3, a first-round pick when Saleh was there, if I'm not mistaken, and so obviously he'd be a scheme fit for the Niners as well. Bradley Chubb is a different type of player on this list. He's a veteran. He's a little bit older, like Trey Hendrickson. Not as accomplished as Hendrickson, but he's had some phenomenal years. I don't think the price tag for him would be all that high for a Dolphins team that could be selling and is starting to sell going into the deadline as they traded Jalen Phillips earlier this morning. Chubb is having a good season. 4 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, 15 pressures, a pass rush grade of 56.8. If you watch that Thursday night game, he did a good job of at least moving Lamar Jackson off his spot, being able to collapse the pocket and provide pressure. What's notable for him, he did get a pretty big contract somewhat recently over the last couple of years. No guaranteed money, though, left on that deal, and that could be something that appeases the Niners. Arden Key, he too, a little bit banged up. That could cause the Niners to hit pause. I think he's dealing with a hip injury right now, but this is a player who had 6.5 sacks for the Niners a couple of years ago, back in 2021 or 2022, and knows this scheme, can play the wide 9. The Niners like these types of defensive ends who can play defensive tackle and defensive end. This year, 1.5 sacks, 4 quarterback hits, 9 pressures, a pass rush grade of 57.1. But if you bring him in, to this Niners team. Obviously, he'd be revitalized playing for a contender, and I think you get the best out of him when he's healthy. Other edge rusher trade targets. I don't think the Texans trade away Danielle Hunter, but with the Texans losing again yesterday, maybe that makes him expendable. They're going to have to pay Will Anderson soon. They're going to have to most likely pay C.J. Stroud soon. Prayers up to him. Ugly concussion yesterday. But Danielle Hunter, in his early 30s, so he's older, still one of the best pass rushers in the game. Arnold Ebiketie is a player who's kind of out of the rotation for Atlanta. I think that he would be a good player for the Niners. He's had a history of getting after the quarterback. Boye Mafe is a non-factor for Seattle right now, but to start his career, his sack number is really good, and I don't think the Niners would have to break the bank for a player like that. Obviously, in-division trades are rare, but they have happened. Darrell Taylor started his career with Seattle, then went to Chicago after he was traded there. He's had some good sack production. He's playing for Houston right now, not getting a lot of snaps, but the scheme familiarity between D'Amico Ryans and Robert Saleh is there. And then Myles Murphy is a former first-round pick by Cincinnati, who is the forgotten-about edge rusher for Cincinnati because they have Shamar Stewart and they have Trey Hendrickson. But if the Niners want to take a chance on a former first-round pick with a lot of athletic upside, who's a freak in that regard for a selling team, Myles Murphy, who is a good player at Texas, could make some sense for the Niners as well. So who do you want San Francisco to trade for? Join the conversation down in the comment section. John Lynch, it's your time. You got to make a move.